looking to the end zone for the win. He caught it. Ball game. Chiefs to the championship game.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 84 here on SportsSpeak. I'm Tim Moore, along with a regular contributor here on SportsSpeak, Rahill Jaiswal. And right now, fresh on everyone's minds, I mean, quite literally, breaking news, not even an hour ago to the point of recording, Tom Brady. I don't exactly think Mother Time has quite caught Tom Brady, but Tom Brady has called it quits. He's retiring as of today and calling it a career after a fresh loss last week in the divisional round. And honestly, I mean, just to first off say, Tom Brady coming into the league, I mean, for me right now, obviously, we know the whole story from low round draft pick to what eventually became the greatest quarterback of all time. But thinking on it, rather you like Tom Brady or not, rather you hate the New England Patriots era or you love it, you may be a fan of it. You have to respect his fact, just like Peyton Manning and how good of a quarterback he was, how strong of an understanding he had the game. Of course, last year we had the whole discussion of, well, was it Bill Belichick? Was it Tom Brady? When generally it was just two great talents in a room that understood football to their fullest. But if you're a person like me, 23 years old, have grown up and have gone through a system of seeing football, players coming and going, Tom Brady has been that one consistent my entire livelihood since I've been born in 1998. And he's the one player that I can still identify with from being a child. And sure, by no means was I a Patriots or a Bucks fan. But when it's all said and done, just like how Eddie and I, we talk about NASCAR, guys like Dale Earnhardt Jr., I've grown up on, guys, Jimmy Johnson, and even now Kevin Harvick and so on, that's still racing the sport. You look at Tom Brady, and yes, not only is he once in a generation, we may never have a quarterback as good, which time will tell, but we may never see another quarterback as good and as unique of a story than Tom Brady. But you have to respect the fact that when it's all said and done, what he's been able to do, no other person in this league may ever be able to do. And it stinks to see an icon go, but of course, time at some point will tell. I just don't think any single person would have thought Tom Brady might have had the prime of his career, battling for an MVP this year. Now we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit as well. But Tom Brady ultimately retiring in what I feel like is still his prime. It's definitely surprising, Rahill.
Yeah. Obviously, the reports came out that, he was contemplating retirement. And at first I was like, there's no way. There's no way that even if these are true, he has to be coming back. I mean, you just mentioned it, Tim. He threw for over 5,000. I mean, yes, there was the extra game. He threw for over 5,000 yards. He was top 3 in every single passing category: completion percentage, completions, touchdowns, yards. He was top 3 in everything. So to see him, it was really shocking. I mean, I don't know why he retired. I mean, yes, he was, how old was he? 43 or 44?
Closing in on 44.
Yeah. So I'm shocked. I'm really shocked. You just mentioned it. He was probably going to be a finalist for MVP behind Aaron Rodgers. Like you alluded to, we'll talk about that later. And I don't know, maybe Tim, if he won this year, I firmly believe that maybe if he won this year, he would have stayed again, because he would have maybe wanted to go out the chance at winning 3 in a row. But man, yeah, this is really, because, if it's not like sort of when Peyton Manning retired, because we all knew Peyton Manning was going to be retired. Let's be honest, his arm strength wasn't there, and he was clearly on the back of his career. Even Drew Brees last year, we saw the aging in the retirement. Tom Brady, we saw no aging. He was almost better than he was when he first came into the league. So yeah, it's I'm shocked. I mean, I can't believe he actually called it quits. But that's it, 22 years, 7 Super Bowls. I mean, he's the greatest of all time. Whether you like him or hate him, you have to say that he's the greatest of all time. And I don't think we're ever going to see another quarterback like him. At least the amount of Super Bowls he got to in his career, I don't think we'll ever see that again.
Yeah, I think the closest we'll see presently is Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, we saw that rivalry now over the last 2 years, or really 2 years ago, where we saw just such a wonderful AFC Championship game, which, of course, last week, obviously, we saw just how good this playoffs has been from start to finish, especially with that trip to OT for the Kansas City Chiefs. However, I do want to transition into this topic in regards to Tom Brady. Obviously, we know that he's retiring, and the Tampa Bay Bucks now, there's a lot of limbo in what we're going to see. Because first off, obviously, I think it's going to be safe to assume Brady's retiring. Rob Gronkowski's probably out the door as well. He only wants to catch balls for Tom Brady. That's not an ego thing, but that's more of a respect thing in regards to Rob Gronkowski, that he only wants to catch balls for one person throughout his career. And with that being stated, I would expect Rob Gronkowski to be out the door. But we also have to remember this. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a team that brought back almost every player they physically could from that Super Bowl team. They brought back every single starter they could. And this team is an aging process now without a quarterback and instantly falls under limbo. And the other question, too, that you have to ask outside of those players that may leave, on the defensive end or even on the offensive end, what's going to happen with Bruce Arians? Because remember, last year, Bruce Arians was on the brink of retirement. Could this be it for Bruce Arians as well? Could the Buccaneers be going through another rebuild process? And I guess I'll start with my remarks. I think yes. I mean, nothing against Kyle Trask. I'm eager to see what he has capabilities of doing. Obviously, going through Florida and being there now for the start of his career, I'd like to see what he's capable of. But I think the Bucs are going to be in a focused direction of drafting a quarterback and really trying to find answers for a team, because this is all sudden. And to be honest, I mean, yeah, they have picks, but they don't have depth. Like, for example, the New York Giants or the Jets doing a draft. They're going to be a late round draft pick. And with the quarterbacks that there are to offer for this year, there's not many options. And honestly, in terms of free agency, I know everyone wants to hope and wish on Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers stated that he's very likely sticking with Green Bay. Free agency is not an option unless there's a trade. So you're going to have to really hope for a lot of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here.
Yeah, the thought just popped in my head. Do they try and go out? Do they try and go after Rodgers? Do they go from Brady to Rodgers? Because what's their other option, Tim? I mean, you plug in Kyle Trask there, but no disrespect, I loved Kyle Trask when he was in college, but he's not. They're not ready to win the Super Bowl with Brady, and now you've got this roster that's still win now. You look at all these guys, Vita Vea, they locked him up on a big deal. Shaq Barrett is there. Still, so is JPP, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. These are win now guys. These are not guys you build for the future with. And yes, a lot of them are still young, but it's a win now team. Let's be honest. So now all of a sudden that Brady is gone. So what? And you plug in Trask there. Can Trask take this team to the playoffs? I don't know. This team had so many injuries. And really the only reason they were only able to stay afloat was because of Tom Brady the whole season. So it's a real interesting question. It's crazy to think that 1 year removed after winning the Super Bowl, they're going into a rebuild year. It's crazy to think about. They got Brady, they pushed all the chips in, and they thought, I think this probably took Tampa Bay by a surprise, because with the roster they had around him, they thought he was probably going to play for another 2-3 years maybe after this. And now all of a sudden, after 2 years in Tampa, 1 year with the Super Bowl, they're stuck. And you mentioned Bruce Arians. I mean, maybe Bruce Arians does retire, and then who knows? Maybe they go after someone like a Sean Payton or maybe even a Brian Flores. He's kind of similar to Bruce Arians as far as discipline goes, but they're also in the running for a new offensive coordinator, because Byron Leftwich has gone to Jacksonville. So there's a lot of questions, Tim, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it this offseason.
Well, the other question I guess you can ask too is, maybe does Jameis Winston pop right back into the mix? Because you have to remember too, Saints looking for a brand new head coach. And of course, I know Winston hurt still, has to, get back healthy first. But could we see him returning back to Tampa Bay? It's a possibility, because let's be honest, he didn't play that bad while he was healthy.
They were 5-2 with him at the as a starter, and they beat Tampa Bay with him. So.
And there's a lot of options. Of course, there's still the question of Jimmy G and San Francisco. What will happen there? Trey Lance and so on. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for the Buccaneers to make some trades. It's not going to be easy, though. And needless to say, for the Buccaneers, this team now all of a sudden doesn't just have a lot of pressure on them to make the next step, but they by far now maybe the team that's going to have the biggest story of the offseason, not just because Brady retired, but there's a lot of moving pieces. Obviously, we know the drama with Antonio Brown, which we won't even get started about, towards the end of the season. But this team had become the story throughout the playoffs, and now the fact that it's going to be an even bigger story during the offseason should be exciting. But I also did mention drama, of course. I briefly mentioned Aaron Rodgers and the potential of maybe a trade. He reported on the Pat McAfee show, at least, that free agency, at least for this year, very likely not an option. The Green Bay Packers will not release him. However, he is open for trade opportunities, and as well for himself, still analyzing every option. So, of course, Tom Brady retires Rahill, but now the question is this: does Aaron Rodgers retire too? Because he is contemplating all options, or do we see him staying in Green Bay, keeping Devontae Adams there, who, by the way, his decision kind of looms around Aaron Rodgers, or do we see him traded to somewhere else? Of course, a lot of teams looking for a quarterback. I know a lot of people rumored, for example, Denver, although I don't quite exactly see Aaron Rodgers going to Denver through a trade.
So is Rodgers a free agent, or?
To my understanding, no. He has an option year left, if it's correct. But he basically said free agency himself would not be a realistic option for this year. Didn't specify next year, but this year. But he needs to make the decision on what he wants to do. He hasn't ruled out retirement. He hasn't obviously ruled out coming back to Green Bay, but he's going to have his discussion with his people, as he quotes, in Green Bay, saying that he has right now a very good relationship and he thinks the discussion helped, but he wants to make sure that he can get himself to the next step and the team to the next step to getting to that next level.
I mean, I think he's done in Green Bay, Tim. The only way I saw him coming back was if they won the Super Bowl. And granted, you can say a lot of that falls on him. And, people are going to blame the special teams about that game, but he only scored 10 points. But I feel like it's done in Green Bay. All the noise he created in the off season, and then now, to falter in the big moment. I mean, I don't know. I guess they're going to stick with Jordan Love, but Green Bay is also in a really interesting situation, Tim, because if you look at it, they have a lot of guys that are up for contract negotiations, extensions, or they're going to let go. I don't know if you saw, but immediately 2 days after the game, Zadarius Smith put on his Instagram page, "Thank you, Green Bay," with the praying emojis, which alludes to the fact that he's probably gone. And he was a big part of that defense and pass rush. So now there's a lot of people up for grabs. Now, special teams, obviously Mason Crosby might retire. There's that, but it's really, his decision is really going to depend on whether Green Bay is able to keep the key guys there. Randall Cobb, they're probably not going to bring him back. So it really depends on this, because if I do firmly believe if Green Bay was somehow able to bring back that roster, then they can maybe convince Rodgers to come back. But if Zadarius Smith goes, someone like a Kenny Clark goes, or guys on that defense or on the offensive line, maybe, Bakhtiari goes, or maybe even Bakhtiari retires. I don't know. It's going to all depend on that. See if Aaron Rodgers is back in Green Bay. I don't think retirement is an option for him, because now with Tom Brady gone, you'd have to think that he's got a pretty open road if he can find the right team. Now, a lot of teams would be willing to take. Question is, how much are you willing to give up for him? So, I mean, maybe this again popped into my head, but maybe there's a crazy situation with a Seattle, Green Bay, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers swap. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's crazy because the two teams that made the conference championships last year are all of a sudden could be in a rebuilding mode.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I think for Green Bay too, you have to you have to keep your core guys to an extent. This is what Aaron Rodgers' biggest gripe was last offseason. The fact that he felt that a lot of the team's core guys in terms of leadership, and not just skill players, but you have them for a year or two, you have them under contract, and then you don't bring them back. You let them go elsewhere, and you bring in other quote unquote core guys, but they're not very familiar with the system. He mentions, for example, Charles Woodson, for example, just as a person that was a core guy, he felt, and even guys like Jordy Nelson and so on. But the point is that basically Green Bay has a tendency of just, again, bringing in guys, putting them out, and hoping to bring in big leaders. They don't jump at big free agents, but they bring in good, solid football players. But when it's all said and done, how many times for the Green Bay Packers do you have to come so close to lose to the San Francisco 49ers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not just those two teams in particular, but in general? And the one thing I will say that's frustrating about Green Bay, not just Aaron Rodgers, because it's really a team overall, this team is inconsistent, constantly inconsistent. A team that's always consistently with a good record. But, for example, I'll give Washington a great example. Aaron Rodgers struggles against Washington for some reason. But the team overall, when Aaron Rodgers struggles, team defensively struggles, offensively struggles on the run game. Of course, I know a lot of it relies around Aaron Rodgers, but it's very interesting that the fact that you have one player that's having an off day, let's say, or isn't playing well, and everyone else around that suddenly isn't playing well. And not that doesn't happen in football, because it does happen. But the fact of the matter is that it happens a lot of times in big moments for the Packers. Very big moments. I mean, last week, this team should have stomped San Francisco out the water when you look at it on paper. Of course, we know how good the 49ers defense is, and you cannot discredit how good of a defense that team has, how good of a pass rush, just how speedy and diverse that defense is. But that offense is underwhelming. I just want to point this out. Not a lot of people realize this. There is a very good possibility that if Jimmy G wins this NFC Championship game upcoming, he could go to the Super Bowl without throwing a single touchdown pass. He has no touchdown passes, 2 interceptions through his first 2 playoff games. There's a very good chance that defense very much minimalizes the amount of touchdowns they've allowed. I think it's only 1 or 2 through 2 games. Of course, Dallas didn't score many touchdowns. A lot of it came through turnovers and other things that ended up resulting in their scores. But the point is this: Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't even played good football. The guy under center, and that team's advancing. Green Bay, obviously, I mean, what decided the team season was 10 men on the field for ultimately that field goal to go ahead and have San Francisco win. But you cannot be so consistently inconsistent. This team still cannot consistently shut down the run game. However, I will say this: San Francisco was averaging barely 4 yards a carry in nearly 40 attempts. No team arguably stopped them better in the last 6 weeks than the Green Bay Packers. But that still wasn't enough, because this team doesn't have playmakers outside of Aaron Rodgers. This team, yes, I can't discredit Devontae Adams, for the record. Devontae Adams is a playmaker. But when those two aren't connecting, Aaron Jones has a lot of stress on him, of course, contract extension and so on. He as well as a playmaker. But when they have the ability to shut down both of them, because Aaron Jones can't always catch balls when Devontae Adams is not catching them. You can't always throw to a running back and just hope that's going to happen. Allen Lazard is consistently inconsistent. Valdez-Scantling, consistently inconsistent. You'll never have a Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb combo like we saw years ago in Green Bay unless they work on getting someone for Aaron Rodgers. And I know I'm going on this long rant, but the point is I agree with you. Aaron Rodgers needs to go if there's not going to be a contingency plan to help this offense and help this defense bring back its core guys. Because you cannot constantly get to this level and not find success. It just can't keep on happening for Green Bay. And there's opportunities to get big guys. I know the cap situation is not ideal and so on, but there's opportunity to bring in some guys that can help this football team and specifically help out Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when you look at, for example, the Bucs on paper, the Bucs had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin last year, Antonio Brown, right? Scotty Miller, Tom Brady's made a living, as they say, throwing to guys like Scotty Miller. But those are 4 very solid receivers. 3 of them, arguably, at one point in this league, were the most elite receivers the NFL has seen. Not saying that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have that. Devontae Adams is a special talent. But Valdez-Scantling is a mid-tier receiver who has a good vertical deep game. He can catch the ball deep, have good deep routes. Alan Lazard is a surprise, but then he goes inconsistent in big games against good defenses and has 3 catches for 20 yards and maybe 1 touchdown. Maybe if he doesn't drop it in the end zone. The team just needs help. It's that simply put. I'll end it with that. But you've got to find someone that can complement Devontae Adams in that receiving core. And just maybe the Green Bay Packers will win a Super Bowl yet again. But I do want to move on from that point. Obviously, the QB drama, so on. I think it's a done deal for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay if they don't find him any help. And I do want to move on to the next move. Obviously, a lot of transitioning and so on in the league before we talk about our picks and so on for the AFC and NFC. But how about the New York Giants? I'll start with this. I mean, sign in a brand new GM, brand new coach, everyone fresh out of Buffalo. It gives me a little bit of confidence to have the ball come in. Now, might I add, felt like a little bit of a rush job, only for the reason of the fact that they were scared he was going to go to Miami and likely not come back from Miami without a contract. But when it's all said and done, I have to say, real good job by the New York Giants this offseason. This is the one offseason that you can feel there's confidence and progression and you can feel good knowing that this team is going to somewhat go in the right direction of what it needs to.
Yeah. I mean, there was really no, I feel like really at the end of the season, the Giants officially hit rock bottom. I'm going to be completely honest. Tim, even when they had that 2-win season, got the 2nd overall pick, I felt like this year was the epitome and definition of rock bottom with the, Jason Garrett going halfway through the season, then third and, then them just absolutely stinking. And what actually seemed to be promising after making actually a lot of promising moves in the offseason, injuries hit them. But, the 3rd and 9 QB draw out of your QB sneak out of your own end zone. And, Joe Judge just sort of looking just lost in his press conferences. It was for me, it was rock bottom. It really was. But there's only one saying, only one way to go when you hit rock bottom, and that's up. And I like the moves. Everyone's fresh out of Buffalo. You've seen what they built in Buffalo. GM, he was the assistant there. He had a big part in identifying talent, identifying Josh Allen, helping develop Josh Allen, and putting guys around him, getting guys like Cole Beasley, pulling the deal for Stephon Diggs, picking up Devin Singletary, offensive talent. They see offensive talent, and now you get Brian Daboll as their head coach, who offensive coordinator for Buffalo. He's done a great job. And what he did so well is he let Josh Allen be Josh Allen. He let him use his versatility, let him use his size and strength in the run game, take advantage of that big arm. And I'm not comparing Daniel Jones to Josh Allen, but I'm saying I feel like he has the capability of tapping into Daniel Jones's potential as not just a passer, but as a runner, because he can rush the ball. So
I want to make a point of what you just said, though. Not that he's Josh Allen, but obviously arm strength wise, nowhere near Josh Allen. But I do want to say this: very comparable situations for when Daboll came into Buffalo for what he is coming to New York with Daniel Jones. Think about it. When Josh Allen was a rookie and went through his whole transition, what was Josh Allen's biggest problem?
Fumbles.
Turning over fumbles and turning over the football. What was Daniel Jones's biggest problems first 2 years of his career? Which, might I add, give him credit this year, even though everything fell apart, he did do a lot better of a job minimizing turnovers during the start of this season. Obviously, through the injuries and so on, turned over the football a lot more. But the point is, he got a little bit better with it. But very similar situation to Josh Allen, where, hey, maybe we're going to see a different Daniel Jones that plays a lot smarter, minimizes the turnovers. Doesn't mean that he's going to throw for 30, 40 touchdowns in a year and become, big arm Josh Allen, but very similar. We're talking about two quarterbacks that can use their legs, which, might I add, and I mentioned this many times as well last year, I felt that Daniel Jones's running ability was not specialized enough in that offense. There was games where he could turn around and run for 80, 90 yards. And then the following game, we're lucky if we even see him escape out of the pocket once, for a takeoff. I think that Daniel Jones is unique. He's a very good improviser style quarterback. Do I think he's top tier of the league to Josh Allen? Absolutely not. But the fact that there is some confidence with him moving forward in terms of this organization and that there's some answers and going to be accountability, that makes me, not just as a Giants fan, feel confident, but it makes me believe that there's going to be some progress. Obviously, next year, probably still going to be a wash. Let's be realistic. This team needs to deal with a lot of cap situations. And if I'm going to be blatantly honest, just like how the signing of Golden Tate was a massive bust, a massive problem for the New York Football Giants, I think the first move you have to make, if I'm being honest, for New York, is getting rid of Kenny Golladay. I know it sounds nuts. But I truthfully believe that Kenny Golladay will not, no matter what way you put it, fit in this system in the New York Giants. I think that Golladay is going to, again, his separation percentage, terrible. You got paid a lot of money, did not have a single touchdown reception this year, and there's no excuse because he was on the football field almost double, if not triple, of Kadarius Toney. Because let's not forget, Kadarius Toney only had 2 starts this year, and he got hurt in one of those starts and ejected in the other one. And every other time that he came on the field, it was for maybe 4 or 5 snaps, throughout, or especially early on throughout the season. And 90% of the time, too, most of those games, he ended up leaving with an injury. So I'm not exactly out on Kadarius Toney. I think he's the best receiver the Giants have right now moving forward. Another person, too, I think the Giants do need to part from, Sterling Shepard. I think Sterling Shepard's been whatever consistent. He had a great start last year, but between the injuries and the contract, that's one contract that can help the Giants moving forward. And I know, again, we're talking about receivers. We're talking about guys that can help Daniel Jones. But I think you could turn around in free agency and get a couple guys that complement Daniel Jones' style as a result. And again, those are guys that are on multi-year deals. I know it's going to hurt for so on, but let's not ignore the fact that the Giants are not trading for Deshaun Watson. They also announced that as well, that that is not realistic because they don't want to deal with that situation, as well as the fact that they have belief that Daniel Jones is going to be good. But you have 2 draft picks. You can get key players in key positions, and you can really draft receiver depth, if anything else. And again, I know Darius Slayton as well. He's gone through his drops, but I seem to think that when he can catch the ball, he's somewhat of a solid receiver. But I think the Giants receiving core needs a look overall to a more modern style of the NFL. And I know you may not agree with that, but I think that this team, if you're going to overhaul and look, you need to look at the position that nearly led the league in drops this season and was a big part of the problem outside of the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with you that the receiver core was extremely disappointing. I'm all on board for getting rid of Sterling Shepard. I'd say you try to keep Golladay for one more year. I mean, it just started out horribly. I mean, he had the injury in training camp, and I'm going to be completely honest, Tim, I didn't see them go one-on-one to him at all inside the red zone. I don't know why that was a thing, considering how big he is, but I never saw them try to do what Mike Evans does. I never saw them try and target him where he can just post up on the goal line. Now, whether they can do that maybe this year, if he can, I mean, he missed 4 games with an injury, but I mean, he did have one decent game in New Orleans where he had over 100 yards receiving, and he stepped up in that one. But I feel like just he wasn't targeted enough. I feel like on 4th and 1, they're trying to run some tricky play to a 3rd string tight end instead of just giving him a chance at it. He's great 50-50 catch, 50-50 guy. So unless you can get something profitable for him, I don't know if a team, maybe even a Green Bay wants to try and trade for him, give Aaron, like we were talking about before, give Devontae Adams some sort of help, because Kenny Golladay was a beast down in Detroit when you can honestly make the argument that the situation was probably worse down in Detroit. But I'm fully on board of getting rid of Sterling Shepard. I mean, I think we've had plenty of conversations. I'm way okay of cutting Evan Ingram at this point. He can't block, which if you can't catch the ball, then what good for you? What are you good as a tight end? We're gonna see what they do with Saquon Barkley. He's up for a new contract. He wants to stay in New York. I'd be more than happy to keep him, but at a price that's affordable. We can't pay him Christian McCaffrey X money, and you see that the Panthers are paying the price now because McCaffrey's been hurt the last 2 seasons. So it's interesting. Bradbury, this is the last year of the Bradbury deal. So after that should clear up some cap room as well. So there's reason to believe that there's some hope. Get 2 top 10 picks, probably go 2 offensive linemen. There's no quarterback in this draft you can think of taking. And then maybe you can find a receiver, unless maybe you want to take Jameson Williams or John Mechie in the top 5 and then try and look for offensive line depth later in the draft. You can do that. I think you can still pick up some really good tackles in the 2nd round, but we'll see. But again, I really don't think next season could get any worse than this year.
Do the Giants still have 1 year left with Nate Solder or no? Is this year?
That's a good question. I believe they have 1 more year of him left, but
because I would imagine if just chronologically thinking, I would like to think they're going to let go of Nate Solder. The other question is too, do they release Will Hernandez? That could be a possibility. Of course, I know still on a rookie deal, but he was a part of the problem on that offensive line. There's no doubt. Obviously, the Giants have a young tackle that looks very, very promising. Of course, he caught a touchdown pass earlier on in the season as well. So he was arguably a better receiver this year than Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney. But either way, the fact of the matter is, and by the way, I'm referencing Andrew Thomas. But the point is for the Giants, obviously, some linemen are going to go. When it's all said and done. And I really also have to ask this question. This will be the last one regarding, personnel, but do we think that we're going to see Jabril Peppers next year? I don't really know. I mean, while he played great, but Xavier McKinney has looked very, very promising. Peppers is constantly hurt. I just don't know if the Giants can bring back Jabril Peppers.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I honestly say keep him. Because I just much rather have some extra depth on the team, especially considering what happened this year with injuries. But I don't know. That's a good question. I hadn't thought of that. But McKinney definitely showed flashes of brilliance. But let's be honest, McKinney has had injury problems in the past. He had that foot injury that kept him out for the most of rookie year, and he's been in and out of the lineup. So he's also had some injury problems in the past. And it's so tough to tell, Tim, because you have to game plan for injuries. Because injuries at this point in the league is an all-time high. So you have to have some sort of backup option in case something goes off the rails. So maybe they go and pick up a couple veteran guys again, the cap situation is really, really bad, but maybe you can pick up some veteran guys for cheap that they can just sort of steady the ship sort of thing. So they at least get some depth in the secondary. But that's a really interesting question, Tim, that I hadn't even thought of. And this kind of brings the question, really almost every single part of the Giants, offense, defense, special teams, O-line, receivers, cornerbacks, defensive line, personnel, coaching, everything is a question mark at this point. Like, let's be completely honest.
Yeah, there's absolutely no depth beyond what you have in initial starters. Of course, Giants next year will bring back as well Blake Martinez. I'm eager to see as well what happens with Logan Ryan if the Giants do anything about that. And, of course, pass rushing wise, I'll say Azeez Ojulari did look promising. Of course, set the Giants rookie record, but at the same time, there was no consistency. Leonard Williams, after the great year he had last year, very underwhelming this year in QB hits. In fact, a career low for him. However, he did reach a career high in tackles, which has a little bit to do with it. But how about Dexter Lawrence too? Very underwhelming year for Dexter Lawrence. He's almost non-involved on the team. It was like, in terms of what he was supposed to be. So I'm eager to see what the Giants do as well. Maybe do they bring back Lorenzo Carter free agency and so on. And I do as well just want to ask this last question. Of course, we know ultimately who's going to be the head coach for the New York Giants, but one of those coaches that were on the staff last year had a head coach interview, ultimately did not get hired. Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator. Do we see Patrick Graham coming back to New York, or do we see a new staff overall when it's all said and done?
I hope he comes back because he was the one coach we wanted to keep. The Giants had a rough year on defense, but Graham's bend but don't break style is really something I do like. I think Graham is a great defensive coordinator. I think the players love him. They'll play hard for him. I'm praying that he can come back, but I mean, if a head coaching, I don't know if he'll get a head coaching job, Tim, but maybe if a D coordinator position in a team that's contending all of a sudden, maybe a defensive coordinator position. I don't know what the situation is. I believe who's Dallas's D coordinator again? Dan Quinn. I believe Dan Quinn is staying in Dallas, but that could be if something happens there, that could be an eye-popping thing. New Orleans is always an option if you want to be a head coach there. He can be a head coach in New Orleans, honestly. Defensive minds with already their great defense there, but I hope he stays. But a head coaching job opens up to him. I mean, it's tough not to take.
It is tough not to take. And by the way, who would have thought after that debacle in the Cowboys game that both Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn would still be coming back to the Dallas Cowboys when it's all said and done next year as well with Mike McCarthy. But we're going to wrap up that topic, move on to our final topic here today on Sports Speak. And of course, it's prediction time. I officially have won the Pick'em Championship for this year, beating Eddie. We now each own a championship each after my bold predictions in a wild card round to go undefeated, while Eddie, I think he had 2 or 3 losses. And of course,
Eddie lost all 4 games.
Oh, he lost all 4. Oh,
Me and Eddie lost all 4.
Wow. So yeah. So to turn around and have him, needless to say, have a tough week last week where we picked the same NFC games, so the losses didn't impact me, but we picked opposing AFC opponents. I know he picked the Bills and I picked the Chiefs, and ultimately that sealed it. But of course, I'll start off with the AFC side. I mean, a miraculous game last week between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, arguably the best we've seen since the Brady Mahomes, back and forth AFC Championship game. The Chiefs are looking to try to now go to yet another Super Bowl, try to make it back-to-back championships with Randy Reid appearances in particular. However, they take on the Cincinnati Bengals, who, let's be honest, no one thought they'd get this far, but yet somehow this team has stuck in. Joe Burrow, with ice in his veins, is looking to bring the Cincinnati Bengals, who, again, hadn't won a playoff game well before I was born, won 2 playoff games, and potentially looking to bring this team to a Super Bowl. I said it last week, at least to Eddie. I don't know. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to dominate this one on paper, but with the way the playoffs have been, everything's been so close, contested, 1-possession games. I don't want to count out the Bengals, but gosh, I just don't know if the Bengals can hang. How do you feel on this?
I mean, they got them in the regular season. It all comes down to, in my opinion, to the Chiefs D line against the Bengals O line. If they can get pressure without blitzing, because if you blitz, you're going to leave Jamar Chase and T. Higgins one-on-one. And they saw in the matchup they played in Cincinnati, with the game that Cincinnati won to clinch the division, you saw how that worked out. Jamar Chase had 230-plus receiving yards, and they absolutely got cooked. And let's be honest, the Chiefs secondary, even with Tyrann Mathieu in there, is still very vulnerable. they're vulnerable to a lot of big plays. The Bills game is one. I know Tyrann Mathieu wasn't there, but when they played the Bills earlier in the season, they got him with the big plays. The Bengals got him with the big plays. And let's be honest, Denver could have gotten him with a couple big plays in the last game of the season, but it was just that Drew Lock missed Jerry Jeudy, I think, like 3 times when he was 25 yards down the field wide open. So this defense is not great. And Frank Clark and Chris Jones have not been getting to the QB, because Burrow overcame 9 sacks last week to somehow get the win, Tim. I don't think that's ever happened. A team that has gotten their QB sacked 9 times, he somehow stayed composed and got the win. So if they can keep him upright, I think the Bengals can honestly win this game, because the Chiefs secondary can't hang with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins if they go man coverage when they blitz.
Yeah, and by the way, to answer the point you made, I think the only game I can recall in terms of playoff history may have been, and I could be wrong on this, but the Eli Manning game against San Francisco, if you remember, where he was getting
oh my God, that's the iconic one where he's got the shoulder pad halfway down, and yeah.
But I'm saying that's the only game I think I can recall where someone's been sacked 9 times and still at the end of the day still comes victorious. But needless to say, yeah, I mean, the offense is power. And again, I can't discredit, of course, the Bengals beat the Chiefs earlier in the season. But we have to remember, this is the NFL. It's not easy to beat a team twice. It really is not. And I do agree. The Chiefs defense is still concerning. Steve Spagnuolo, don't get me wrong, very great defensive coordinator, but really doesn't have consistent pieces on that defense to be a threat. I mean, even since this team got Tyrann Mathieu, which at one point Honey Badger was the best safety in the league, it doesn't do much. These corners are consistently inconsistent. And honestly, I don't want to give a direct comparison, but it really, outside of the massive turnover rate that was created early on in the season, reminds me a lot of the Dallas Cowboys. If you think about it, remember how scary the pass rush used to be for the Cowboys, and now it's kind of outside of Micah Parsons, kind of yeah, Randy Gregory's played great. Well, for the Chiefs, yeah, you look at their defense. Obviously, you have that big defensive tackle you paid a lot of money to, who did a really good job of being a pass rusher. You look at those ends. They used to be really, really dominant, but yet no one can get a pass rush off now. And the big thing, too, is, the linebacker position for the Chiefs for years has always been, translucent. You put in guys, you've subbed out guys, and so on. There's not really still a good linebacker that you can trust on game in and game out for the Kansas City Chiefs. And yeah, the secondary is the secondary, but I mean, what? Daniel Sorensen's not getting you anywhere anytime soon in terms of being a playmaker outside of Tyrann Mathieu. So, I mean, yeah, Tre'Davious Ward looked very promising, but when it's all said and done, I mean, I expect a big offensive game. I don't think it's going to be better than last game for the Chiefs. I don't think it's going to be Buffalo Bills type of explosive, but I do expect it to be a 1-possession game, and I expect the Kansas City Chiefs to ultimately just edge out the victory with the offense, which might add to give Patrick Mahomes credit. There's been a lot of criticism for him on the start of the year as well with his family, which we won't even go into discussion about. But the fact that he's been able to go through those distractions, get better as the season goes on, that to me is something that's very promising and shows as good of a quarterback as he can be. And by the way, you're running out of time with Travis Kelce as well. He's getting up there in age. Tyreek Hill is still a speed demon, and what a play he made at the end of last week. But this team has offensive weapons for a reason, and to see them not go to another Super Bowl would be very surprising.
Yeah, KC opens as a 7-point favorite, but I honestly think it's just Cincinnati is just one of those teams that, like, you could never count them out, because Cincinnati, honestly, you can make the argument, can match KC power offense. Receiving core, like, I'm looking at the receiving core for KC outside of Tyreek Hill. I mean, I'm taking Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins over Byron Pringle and McCole Hardman. Now, tight end, that's no question. Obviously, it's Travis Kelce, but Tim, it's a classic. Who's just going to get the stop? Who's going to get? This is going to be one of those games. Which quarterback has the ball at the end of the game. We all knew once KC won the toss against Buffalo that it was over. We all knew Buffalo wasn't stopping. And I do believe if Buffalo got the ball, we all would have said it was over. No way KC was stopping Buffalo. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring, but which QB is going to have the ball in the last 2 minutes? That's going to decide this game.
100% agree. I think that's what it's going to come down to. But let's transition now over to the NFC Championship game. Two teams that, let's be utterly honest, no one thought they were going to see an NFC Championship game this year. First, the San Francisco 49ers, a team that, again, I mentioned, defense, absolutely incredible, but not a single passing touchdown for this offense. Yet somehow, some way, they're the NFC Championship game. Of course, Deebo Samuel has completely carried this team from start to finish of the San Francisco 49ers. But when it's all said and done, they're going to be facing off against division rival, the Los Angeles Rams, who, of course, many Lions fans, I'm sure, would love to see win, as Matthew Stafford proves that right now, at least to this point, Detroit was the problem and not him, as he carries a team, which, by the way, almost had the Atlanta Falcons type blow to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, letting them back into the game. But the Rams looking to go back to a Super Bowl. Sean McVay looking to get vengeance. Of course, it's not going to be against Tom Brady, but looking to get vengeance and getting his first Super Bowl title. You know, it's funny. We talk about it on the opposite side with the Bengals and the Chiefs, where it's like, yeah, you know, the Bengals had a great run. Is it over? But can you say that about San Francisco, a team that quite literally, outside of a couple division wins, did not really beat a credible opponent this year until the playoffs? And yet this team's here, they're prime possession, potentially for a Super Bowl win. But at the same time, the Rams have had their upper end this season. The Rams have played well against San Francisco throughout this year. So the question is, do the Rams do it again, or do we see San Francisco finally get some vengeance on the Rams and show them that this team, even with Jimmy G under center, can win a Super Bowl?
It's you can't. It's always tough to pick these divisional games. I'd probably lean toward Los Angeles, but San Francisco's had their number, beat him twice this year, and Kyle Shanahan is the one guy Sean McVay hasn't been able to get past. So this is a really big game, coaching-wise, for the legacy of Sean McVay, because no one talks about this enough, but Sean McVay has done an absolutely unbelievable job with the Rams. They had not seen a playoff appearance for God knows how long before he got there. When he gets there in the next, in his first 5 years, makes 4 postseasons, and he makes the Super Bowl. He has done an unbelievable job with this Rams team. But the one guy he has not been able to get past is the San Francisco team with Kyle Shanahan. I think the Rams have got, the 49ers have got him like 5 or 6 times in a row. And I don't think McVay has beaten Shanahan. So this is a really big coaching, for his legacy, it's a really big coaching game. And it's also going to come down to, Tim, who wins the battle of the trenches? Which line is it going to be the Rams O-line that's able to not dominate, but hold the 49ers D-line to give Stafford time and establish, because both teams need to establish a run game. Both teams are looking to establish a run game. Or is it going to be the other way? Is San Francisco going to do what they did to the Rams earlier in the season, bully their D-line, and establish their run game? Because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, if the Niners, because let's be honest, the Niners' offense looked absolutely horrid against Green Bay. Green Bay absolutely got after Jimmy G. Now, to Jimmy G's credit, he did make a couple big throws at the end of the game. We have to give him that credit. And although, we can say it's the defense, it's the D-line, it's the running game that's carried him, you have to say that when he's been in, they win games. So you have to give him that. Now, it's obviously he's not the reason they're winning games, but when he is in, they win more times when he's in than when he's out, if that makes sense. Because when they try and plug in guys like CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins, they lose games. But when Jimmy G is in, he wins. So we have to give him that. Now, granted, obviously, this reminds me of the run he went on 2 years ago. Remember the first entering the Super Bowl, he had only thrown like a combined 14 passes. in the 2 games leading up to it. But I can't wait to see this game. I'd probably lean toward the Rams also because the way their O-line was able to, we can talk about how they almost blew that game. That was just because of fumbles. But the Rams O-line, considering they didn't have Andrew Whitworth, played really well against the Tampa Bay pass rush. That is pretty good. They were able to shut down Shaq Barrett, Vita Vea, JPP. They did a pretty good job against a Buccaneers D-line that has been considered run stuffers and very tough to block. And like I said, both O-lines are a little banged up. Andrew Whitworth's gimpy. Trent Williams is gimpy. So it's going to be really interesting. But I see the Rams coming through, and I think we're finally starting to see how good of a move Von Miller was for the Rams. I mean, you think about it, after the botched snap that the Rams had and the Buccaneers got the ball at the midfield, Von Miller strip sacks Brady right away. He's a big game player. And then all of a sudden, when you can't devote 3 guys to Aaron Donald because you can't leave Von Miller one-on-one. I don't care how old he is. You can't leave Von Miller one-on-one on the edge. And if you try and double Von Miller, then you got to deal with Leonard Floyd. So I think we're finally starting to see, and this is for the Rams. This is really a home game for both teams because the Niners are going to invade. It's crazy because the Niners might get to the Super Bowl in Los Angeles, but it's probably going to be a home game for them. So both teams really have home field advantage for the next 2 games. But I think I'm going to lean with the Rams. I've been saying this all along. Matthew Stafford is not the problem. All those people saying, oh, he's a stat patter. Oh, he does this. He does that. I've been saying it ever since they got him that the Rams are a dark horse team to win the Super Bowl. And here they are. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think they'd beat Tampa Bay, but you have to give credit to Matthew Stafford. He has answered the questions. He played really well in that divisional game, and he didn't turn the football over. So we're going to see. I'm going to lean with the Rams, but it's going to be a close one, Tim. I see a situation where both these games in the final 152 minutes, the game is up for grabs.
Now, I do want to ask you this, and by the way, I do apologize for saying it backwards, of course. San Francisco dominating over the Rams. I said the Rams over San Francisco throughout the season. But, of course, it's the other way around. And you mentioned a big thing for Sean McVay, that goose egg against San Francisco and needing to beat them. That, I think, is the biggest part when you talk about battling through adversity, just like the quarterback under center for the Rams and Matthew Stafford battling through adversity. And I think the big thing is, too, obviously we mentioned how it's going to come down to who has the football last on the AFC side. Well, I think it's going to come down to who turns over the football last on the NFC side.
100%.
And it's that's I mean, these 2 defenses, again, Von Miller, big game, as you mentioned, always getting these big sacks. I mean, you can always remember Super Bowl 50 and how he tore apart what was a dominant offense for the Carolina.
And Tim, people don't remember how he completely tore Brady up in that AFC title game in the previous round. So.
Yeah, well, and remember, too, they had that near moment with Rob Gronkowski as well towards the end of that game. But at the same time, the point is he tore apart that offense and made big play after big play defensively. And let's not forget, too, this team offensively gave themselves help. And more than I hate to say it, man, has Odell Beckham Jr. been a find for the Los Angeles Rams. I will give him that. And, of course, you have Jalen Ramsey on the opposite side on the defensive end that has done nothing but compliment OBJ and say how much of a big player he's been for this team, not just getting defensive backs better, but overall helping receivers and getting this team better. And I do have to say, Sean McVay's found ways to bring in stars and bring in big players and make them fit. But I think that at the end of this year, OBJ is going to be probably staying in LA for a good little bit based upon the fact that not just because he's the guy now, but it's more of there's a focus and there's an understanding and McVay's very, very good at scheming. But going back to the point of the game, I think the defense is going to come down to play because, I mean, San Francisco, that pass rush is good. But honestly, too, I know obviously Bosa's scary off the edge, but Bosa is not Aaron Donald. It's that simple. Aaron Donald can have a triple team on him and he can still get through. And that's no disrespect. I mean, you put doubles on Bosa, he'll get on through. But Aaron Donald has never in his career not gotten through a triple team. Aaron Donald has been one of the most dominant players that might have had too. Started as a defensive tackle, can transluce himself to a defensive end. He is a beast. He's a physical monster, and there is just simply no stopping him. Very similar to back in college days, Ndamukong Suh, just in my opinion, with a much better pass rushing ability and much more versatility. But this Rams team, I mean, again, the pressure. They can do this. I really think the Rams can do this with this defense. And honestly, if you remember 2-3 years ago, and I remember having the first discussion of this after Bruce Beck's broadcasting camp about the Rams making the transition to LA, but also going through all these trades, all these processes. When the Rams made all these big signings, you have to win now. I said the same thing as well for the. You have to win now. You can't go through all of this and not win a Super Bowl. This is the Rams' Super Bowl to lose, in my opinion. While, yes, the Chiefs are a very good football team, and obviously if they win, they're going to be Super Bowl favorites. But you cannot go through all this process to take a team from nothing, turn them into constant playoff contenders every single year, even nearly win a Super Bowl with Jared freaking Goff. Came close. Of course, the Patriots dominated, but the point is you got that far. Now you've got a gunslinger. You've got a quarterback who can throw. You've got every piece you can answer depth-wise up and down this roster. It's a shame that this team isn't theoretically the best team in football, record-wise going to this point and hasn't had a dominant year. But you have so many good players. This team made so many good trades. It's like almost watching baseball where you trade for big players, sign big, free agents because you want to win now. To me, there is no way the Rams can get to this point and not win now. I've got the Rams winning this game. And honestly, I said in the preseason, I thought I had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl this year. I don't want to jump to Super Bowl predictions, but I see the Kansas City Chiefs losing to the Rams and the Rams getting a Super Bowl. I think they can do it this year, and I think this team has the capability and the drive to do so.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. It's this crazy season's coming down to the last couple games. Gonna be interesting. I want to see a Bengals Rams Super Bowl, and I want to see how many sacks Aaron Donald can get on that Bengals O line, because that would be he could probably he'd probably win Super Bowl MVP. He could probably get like 6 sacks on that O line.
Would that be worse, though, than last year, is my question in regards to Patrick Mahomes running around like crazy because he had no linemen to protect him. Of course, no injuries for the Bengals, but the point is that you're going to see Joe Burrow running for his life, and would that make it a very low-scoring game again in terms of, at least not on the opposing end, but on the
Bengals, yeah.
Bengals?
We'll see.
We'll see. Again, though, the conference championship week, it's going to be exciting. There's no doubt about it. The playoffs in general have been arguably the most exciting it's been in football history. And the fact that we've had a 17th additional week of games in football have pleased every fan, in my opinion. I will say that they've done a good job this year in making it. The only question is, will there stop being controversy at some point in the NFL playoffs? And what I don't mean is games that go on, but it seems like every year there's a call. There's something that goes on that's always controversial. So will it ever end?
Probably
we'll never know. That question will continue on very likely forever. But I expect this weekend to be the best weekend. Maybe not surpass last week's divisional game, like I said, but I expect it to be real good. 2 teams fighting to get to where they want to be. And I think that this is going to be arguably one of the best Super Bowls we've seen in a long, long time. But that's going to wrap it up here for episode 84 here on Sports Beat Rahill. I want to thank you for coming on, as always, and being a regular contributor here on the show. If you want to tune in more, you can go right on the YouTube channel at SportsSpeak and watch our past episodes, all 83 other ones. You'll see that down below. I want to hear your picks in the comment section as well. Who do you have going to the Super Bowl and why? And by the way, who do you see winning MVP now that Tom Brady's retired? Do you see Tom Brady maybe turning around and getting a little bit of a hoorah and winning the MVP on his way out? Or is it going to be his rival of Aaron Rodgers getting his back-to-back MVP championships, even though the team yet again comes short of a Super Bowl? You can also tweet us live at SportsSpeak Live and tell us your picks as well there. That's going to do it here today on SportsSpeak. I've been Tim Moore saying so long. Want to wish Eddie the best in Nebraska. He'll be back for next episode, of course, calling a Rutgers-Nebraska game. But we'll see you next time on SportsSpeak. Have a good one.